Hello dear viewers, today is the 5th of March and my first review will not be a summary from the front. As I already said, I will try to do some reviews in the mornings, which certainly relate to the events in Ukraine, in which I will try to figure out what is really happening outside the combat zone. What is going on in the mines, what's going on in cities, and what can we be ready for not in the near future, but in a month or a year. After the events in Ukraine began on the 24th of February, I am often asked the question, don't you see how fiercely the Ukrainians hate the Russians? Don't you understand that this is forever? There will be no other way. No, I don't understand. Rather, I perfectly understand how the mechanism of fooling people works. I can clearly see how people's attitudes change after a few years of total brainwashing. And I, as an engineer, perfectly understand that it is worth pulling the toggle switch and the process will go back. In fact, human psychology has already been studied. It was described back in the 60s and 70s. And the modern man, if he is not critically thinking, and in 90% of cases these are not critically thinking people, then this is a bio-robot that acts according to his program. I hate to say these words, but unfortunately, at the moment it is a fact. And in fact, how this mechanism works, I can already show with specific examples. In the cities of Berdyansk, Melitopol, Kherson, the same processes are taking place. First, you need to understand that most of the population of the cities do not hate Russian people. They just got used to being afraid. And those people who really hate Russians are a minority. But they're used to being at the top and they think everything is allowed to them. If we pay attention to the first events from the cities, we will see that this minority came out to the so-called pro-Ukrainian rallies. And they have shown that they are an absolute minority everywhere. This is the reason that such rallies ended very quickly. This applies to cities in the south and east of Ukraine. Of course, in the center, especially in western Ukraine, the situation looks completely different. We'll talk about them some other time. Now we're talking about the cities of the south and east of Ukraine. But their attempts to intimidate the rest of the population did not stop. When Russian humanitarian aid arrived in the cities, hidden Nazis who did not want to go out with Molotov cocktails, but simply sat in their houses, showing their hatred on the internet and not with weapons in their hands, tried to intimidate the rest of the city's residents. God forbid you accept Russian humanitarian aid, you betrayed us, and we will punish you. Yes, for a while on the first day it worked, but on the second day it stopped working. Moreover, in the same Melitopol yesterday, a huge number of people went out for Russian humanitarian aid and said thank you to the Russians for saving them from hunger. And already yesterday, these so-called patriots did not even begin to protest against the distribution of humanitarian aid. It stopped working. For now it works in Kherson, but only for the time being. The fact is that in Russia they are well aware of what processes are taking place in people's brains, due to what factors they make decisions, and I can see from the first actions that Russia is very well prepared in this regard. One of the first actions of the Russian authorities in the same Kherson, Melitopol, was to turn off all Ukrainian TV channels and create a Russian television broadcasting network, which over time will refresh the brains of citizens who are in the broadcast zone. Of course, different factors will affect the speed of flesh in the brains. The shelling of cities, the destruction in the hometown will slow down these processes, but there will also be those actions that will accelerate the same processes, the restoration of infrastructure and eventually the improvement of life in cities, the improvement of expectations for the future. And this will speed up the processes. The current authorities of Ukraine understand this very well. It is for this reason that they are doing everything in their power to ensure that the cities of Ukraine are destroyed as much as possible. Not because they hope to retain power, but because they hope to delay those processes that seem to me already irreversible. It's unavoidable. This will work both ways. For this reason, Russian troops today are trying to occupy large territories, including those with a population that currently believes that it hates the Russians and will always hate them. But they think so only now. And 8 years ago, they did not think so. And in 8 years, they will not think so. Although I think this will happen much earlier. It's really just a matter of time before people start thinking differently. This is what science says. And I also noticed a very interesting point. President Zelensky, military expert Arestovich and other guys comment on the events of recent days like, In the beginning, they will not succeed, they will quickly lose. The whole world is with us, we will stand. After a few days, the rhetoric began to change. Yes, they went somewhere, but it's all the same. Victory will be ours, especially since the whole world is still with us. They began to doubt it. If we analyze the last 2 days, we see severe disappointment. Just yesterday, Zelensky openly reproached NATO for leaving Ukraine. For the second day in a row, his pocket military expert has been calling on the people of Ukraine to prepare for a total war, because the enemy has gone very far and it's necessary to make sure that he cannot gain a foothold in the territory. Moreover, the authorities showed disappointment not only in the Western allies, but also in the speed of advance of the Russian troops. Moreover, even the first threats had already fled from the ship. Yesterday, a very interesting message came from Cherkasy, when the mayor of the city said that their prosecutor had escaped from the city. He wrote a letter of resignation and fled to Lvov, because, of course, he would not be allowed to cross the border. And the day before, the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Venediktova, announced that such cases are not isolated. They have already become massive. And I want to draw your attention to very interesting circumstances. Pay attention to how the role of the SBU is not particularly visible today. It is the SBU that should lead the fight against the enemy in the rear. But today, the so-called self-defense units work primarily in the rear, and the role of the SBU is generally invisible. It seems to me that this is due to the fact that the SBU officers see everything perfectly. They see the abyss into which everything is going. They are simply preparing for a new time, when they will have to adapt to a new life. The SBU officers, as well as the prosecutor, perfectly see the situation, because they have much more information, and of course, they do not believe in the nonsense that is being shown on TV. Against the backdrop of all this patriotic hysteria that has risen in recent days, by the way, many of my friends, sometimes former friends, on the internet want the war to go to a victorious end, to kick out the Russians. But among my acquaintances, only one person signed up for the defense. And they are all hiding from mobilization together. They moved to spare apartments so that the mobilization would not affect them in any way. They are waiting for how it all will end. Well, then they, like ordinary people, will simply adapt to new circumstances, because the psychology of humanity is the same for everybody. People who look at the process from the outside, especially from a very high level, understand everything perfectly, see everything perfectly, and as I see from the first action of the Russian authorities, they are preparing for a very long struggle for the return of the Ukrainians. That's what I can say on this topic. By the way, I've surfed inside the Russian society, and I will also make a separate article on the topic. What changes within society have the Western sanctions against Russia led to? As well as about the information attack that is being carried out today not only by Ukrainian cyber troops, but also by Western cyber troops. In fact, the results are very, very remarkable, so I recommend waiting for this release. That's all, goodbye. I think the next material will be devoted to the military summary. Wish you all the best.